Hi, good afternoon, Keith. It is so good to be here with you, to see you in person, and also to just find out more about your office and your practice and how you serve the people of North Carolina, and in particular Wake Forest and the surrounding areas.
Okay. Yeah, our law practice is based out of Wake Forest, downtown Wake Forest. We've been here right at 50 years now. I've been a part of the firm for 28 years and counting. My practice now in the present day is primarily probate administration work, estate planning work, and I still do some civil litigation and some fiduciary litigation. However, we have kind of taken on a sort of a traditional approach to the practice of law that you don't see quite as often anymore, and that is basically remaining a general practice firm. And so we still handle a very broad breadth of work in different practice areas where we can. Our approach is and mine in particular, has always been we want to try to make sure people have some access to legal advice. We don't take all cases that come in, but we at least try to make an effort to talk to anybody that has an issue, because sometimes you just can't get an answer, or you just don't get a good reason why somebody may not be taking your case. So that's kind of our approach and our personality. So normally, my clients come in oftentimes to do wills, and along with that, we're going to do fiduciary documents. So we're making sure you have a power of attorney in place, a healthcare power of attorney in place, and a living will. And then we take it from there. And then, a lot of our businesses also, unfortunately, comes from after people pass. And so they come back, or the families come back, and we help them with administering their estates and that stuff. We also have a very robust real estate practice. My law partner, James Warren, who founded the firm, has been doing real estate in this area for the better part of 50 years. And so he is really good at that work. And then my second law partner, Kim Thomas, also does similar work. And so, we do a lot of residential real estate closings and try to provide good customer service across the board in all of our practice areas. I mean, our clients are the reason why we're here, and we believe that.
What are your normal hours or availability?
So hour-wise, we open the doors at about 9 o'clock, close them about 5, but usually we're here, for longer than that. There's usually somebody in the building probably from about 8 o'clock to about 6:37 typically, but that's, we're closed doors though. We're not letting you in after 5. But yeah, those are typical hours, Monday through Friday. We schedule all kinds of appointments in between that, and just call the office, 919-556-3134 to schedule appointments, or, if you need to talk to a lawyer, that's kind of the first step.
Right. And the entry for your building is primarily on the side street.
So we are located at 343 South White Street, but we're inside the parking lot. We're kind of sandwiched between South White Street and Brooks Avenue, or Brooks Street on the backside, so you can really enter our parking lot from either direction.
Okay, so do you see more of your clients being from Wake Forest, or
that's a good question.
Triangle
I
area?
think traditionally, I would tell you this: when I first started here, our clients were primarily Wake Forest, but we also drew heavily out of Franklin County and heavily out of Roseville. That is still the case, but I think now with the population in Wake Forest the way it is, the majority of our clients are still based out of Wake Forest.
Keith, you provide a wide variety of services. Can you tell us more about them and how, when people would contact you about your services?
So if we're talking about wills in particular, I get this question a lot, which is, when should we do it? What do we need? That kind of stuff. I think an easy answer to that question is people are going to need a will for different reasons at different stages in their lives. When you look at it from a young couple with young children, or I should rephrase that, a couple with young children, what the focus then is going to be is, hey, if something happens to both of us, who's going to take care of our children and get them to majority, and who is going to manage their assets that they might inherit from us? So that leads to a conversation about guardianship and having a trust and naming somebody that's going to be tasked with managing their assets after you've passed away. If we start looking at it from, down the road,
and now we're aging and life is slowing down a little bit, assuming everything's good with our children, sometimes the will is going to be very straightforward and easy because we're going to just make sure we've got a will in place. But the more important thing sometimes becomes, do we have a power of attorney in place or a healthcare power of attorney in place? Because those things can help us, especially if we get to a point of incapacity. We've already got people named that have the authority to handle affairs for us and make certain decisions, so we can avoid having to do guardianships and some other things and just make things easier for that transition. That's kind of how I approach it, is you just really want to kind of look at where people are. My approach to wills, and I get questions about trust a lot, is, let's identify what your needs are and what your goals are, and then let's figure out what instrument, be it a will, a testamentary trust, or a trust in your will, or a revocable trust, to kind of reach your objectives. And so kind of really making sure that you tailor that to your needs, opposed to just doing documents because that's what you heard about that you needed. So we really gear it towards that. And a lot of things we can do to kind of address those things.
Okay. All right. Because a friend recently asked me to be her caregiver, or just be in charge of her estate or whatever. She's the only one in the area, no family members, and basically it, just here. So I need to sit down and speak with her about what does that mean, and also what legal things that I need to have in the case of her expiring.
So that's a good way to kind of highlight that point, right? So what your conversation really is, first conversation is, what fiduciary offices are you placing me in? Most likely it's executor, which would be, you're going to manage her probate administration or take care of her property after she's passed away. It could be where you've been named her healthcare agent. And if that's the case, then you're talking about, making medical decisions for her, potentially if she's ever in a state where she couldn't make her own healthcare decisions. It could be incapacity or incompetence sets in, like dementia or something like that, where she can no longer really take care of herself. And at that point, as healthcare agent, you would be tasked with making sure she has a place to live, and et cetera. So, that's two of the fiduciary duties. And the third one could be just as her power of attorney or her agent in the power of attorney document. And there you would have the authority then to act and conduct business essentially on her behalf, or personal business. So that's the conversation you're really having. On top of that, though, because it sounds like this person's not a relative, what you would want to do is really make sure you know what she owns, how she owns it, because one of the hardest things is if you don't know where her bank accounts are, you don't know what insurance policies she has, you don't know what kind of accounts she has that are already payable on death to someone. And so you wouldn't have any, even if she makes you the executor, you wouldn't have any way to know where to start. Exactly. So that conversation really is about, hey, where's your list of important information? How do I get to it? Because once you have that, you can do everything else. So it's really that practical side of it. And the other part of it is to think about would be, access to her. If something happens to her, especially if it's death, who secures the house? Who does sort of those practical things that happen, that family members would normally take care of when somebody passes away,
Right.
That makes sense.
Right, it does. That's a big help, because we talk about it, she says it, and it's like, okay, and I'm like, we need to have a conversation.
But that's what you're really
so that's a huge help to me. And also, just other family that might need to just get it done. They're a certain age, and it might be a single person, and they need to make sure that they are getting, having their affairs in order. Because as you said, how would you know where their bank accounts are, or what's their desire? Do they not want to be, to be brought back to life if that's the case? Now that's all she'll tell me. I don't want a DNR, and I'm like, okay, but I might have to ask you some questions before you go DNR, right?
Well, and that's where. So let me kind of drop this with you. So a DNR is different from your advance directive. The DNR is something she needs to do with her doctor.
Okay.
Right? That's a do not resuscitate. So understanding the difference in that, and so what your real question is, do you have a living will somewhere so that
I know that you're ever in a vegetative state that you don't want life-longing measures taken.
Right.
That's your real question.
Right. Right.
So I think it is just really a practical thing of just making sure you know what's what. But it's not a complicated conversation by any stretch. Just to be clear, like these things don't have to be hard.
Right, right. Well, her birthday's coming up on Sunday, so I'll have this conversation with her and see what it does for her. But anyway, I think that that's a big help, what you're sharing with me. And you were speaking about some other, maybe some other fiduciary.
So the fiduciary,
services,
So the fiduciary documents was those three I named. Well, essentially the healthcare power of attorney and the durable or financial power of attorney is what most people call it. That's what I mean. When I refer to fiduciary litigation, that's kind of lawyers come up with all kinds of things to describe what their practice areas are. But what I mean by that is going to be sometimes we get into disagreements over, mom and dad, who's the POA, and there's a dispute maybe on something arising from that potentially, or something with the will. Or something with probate. That's kind of when I'm saying that is that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So, but yeah.
All right. So, and if someone were to pass away without any of this, say if this was a situation between her and I, and she never filled out some paperwork, where would I stand? What would I have to do?
So if she didn't have a will, you mean? Mm-hmm. So if she didn't have a will, somebody would have to step up and one, try to get the estate opened up. The other part of it would be identifying who inherits from her. In the absence of a will, it's potentially parents, at least in North Carolina law, it's potentially parents first, and then let me rephrase that. Spouse and children first, obviously. If there aren't a spouse or children, then we look at surviving parents, if they're surviving parents, and then we look at siblings and so on. That's how we get to be their long-lost rich uncle. Right, is because we kind of start going down this list. But yeah, and then we just take it from there. It's a very similar process. It's just different on how the property's going to pass. That's what makes a will so important, is if you don't have somebody in particular, right, that would naturally inherit from you, it becomes more important to have that will because you want to designate who inherits rather than leaving it to based off what the law says. And so that's where the will becomes important, for yet another reason why a will might be important later in life for depending upon where you are, marital relationships and all that stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a big help. I feel a little better because I have a better idea as to some things that I need to do. Yeah, especially, with her in this situation. So I hear you. Okay. All righty. Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you being with me, spending time with me, and just sharing with me the, ideas, me and other people really, what some things that they might be faced with or things that they need to take care of.
But you should absolutely sit down with a lawyer and talk those things through.
Yeah,
Because no situation is exactly the same. So if there is something comes up, absolutely sit down with somebody. Don't rely just on this conversation, obviously, because facts vary and it may affect what somebody might advise you on. So.
And many ifs, ands, or buts.
Yes, there's always those.
Right, right. Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
All right.
All right.